Promise?
11 gruesome, underrated Saw-like survival horror movies that deserve your time. One of the main reasons behind the success of the horror genre is the kind of escapism that they provide. You can easily take a quick break from your real-life problems and focus on the troubles of some other character. Survival horror is like the icing on the cake, and the thrill of solving complex mysteries to survive from some serious threat provides the perfect adrenaline rush. One of the first names that comes to mind when we think of survival horror is the iconic Saw franchise. This splatter series has a maniacal serial killer, John Kramer, who traps the victims instead of killing them straight away. The deadly games of survival that we saw in movies like Saw have left us scarred and entertained at the same time. The detailing is overwhelming, and the twisted traps have pushed the limits of our imagination. A typical Saw movie will have some strangers brought together to serve as pawns as the game of death would begin. The formula has worked wonders with the fans, making it one of the most successful horror franchises. There have been 9 Saw films so far, and the 10th is in development. In this video, we have compiled a list of movies that give out the same tense, gruesome vibes as Saw. These movies will keep you on the edge of your seats, and if you have the taste for such content, you must try them out. Before we get into the explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click from you, but it means a lot to us. Thank you. Let's begin.
Mad.
Cube, 1997. 6 complete strangers from different walks of life find themselves in a strange situation when they are trapped in a maze of cube-shaped rooms. Some unknown force seems to have brought them together, and nobody has a clue as to how they got there.
Who? Only the government could build something this ugly.
Oh, it ain't government.
Alderson is mysteriously killed, and the others, Quentin, Levin, Holloway, Worth, and Renz, realize that the rooms contain concealed threats that can kill them all. Not all rooms contain traps, and the trick is to move through the right rooms without triggering any sensor. During exploration, they figure out that the traps are triggered by powers of prime numbers and plan their escape accordingly. However, the internal conflict also grows, and it becomes increasingly difficult to work together. Besides, the chambers shift locations, and finding the escape route is extremely difficult. Who will come out of this maze house alive? A movie low on budget doesn't have to be low on quality, and Cube is a perfect example of that. Although it is about the thrill and suspense, the film dives deep into human psychology and how the instinctive urges drive us into chaos at times. Once you watch it, you will be left shaken after witnessing the ugly side of human nature. The premise is fairly simple, with 6 people trapped in the maze, but the complexity lies in the psychological battles. Towards the end, the mathematical calculations become a bit too tricky, but the tension never dies down. We loved the overall sense of claustrophobia and creepiness in the narrative that kept us guessing the whole time. A major part of Cube was shot on a handheld camera, and the whole filming process was completed within 20 days. The budget allowed only 1 cube in the sets, but the makers cleverly changed the colors with gel panels to make it seem like several. The similarity with Saw in terms of the theme is obvious, but this film is original in every sense of the term.
What are you doing? Don't do it, she's just a kid.
Circle, 2015. A group of 50 strangers find themselves locked up in a strange chamber. They cannot remember how they got there, but to their horror, they find out that one of them will die every 2 minutes. A source within creates some kind of electric impulse that causes the deaths, and initially, the attacks seem pretty random. Soon, they figure out a distinct pattern by which the next victim is selected. Basically, the people themselves decide the next individual to be killed by voting on it. Who gets to be the final survivor, and what happens when there is just one left in the chamber? Besides being an impeccable horror thriller, Circle is a hard-hitting drama on humanity and human psychology in times of the worst crisis. The power struggle for survival is intriguing, and a lot of times you will find yourself in a moral dilemma.
I'm just trying to help.
Fuck you.
This film is directed by Aaron Hahn and Mario Michonnet, the same duo who previously worked on the flick The Vault. Circle starts off with a bang, and there is hardly any introduction to the characters. It is only when there are only a few remaining that we learn more about these individuals. The dialogue is well written, and most of the cast are believable and act like any other person would in such a crisis.
Look, nothing personal. I'm just trying to get this to stop.
The rushed ending could have been avoided, and a bit more explanation would have helped the film. However, these flaws are minor in front of the otherwise amazing storytelling. The social observation, victims trapped in a claustrophobic environment, and the imminent death hanging on their heads will certainly remind you of Saw. Battle Royale, 2000. In a Japanese society where everything seems to be going downhill, a group of 42 ninth grade students is forced by legislation to compete in a deadly battle royale. They are sent to an island with explosive-laden collars on their necks. They must kill each other in a fight until there is only one survivor standing. If they do not obey the rules, then they will be executed. Some of the students are willingly a part of this death game, while others simply want to get away from the island without any violence. What lies ahead and who survives? You have to watch this nail-biting thriller to find out. Battle Royale is based on a popular novel by Koushun Takami, which has attracted a fair bit of controversy in Japan. It was a massive commercial success in the country, and even today it ranks among its top 10 highest-grossing films. To have a good understanding of the movie, it is best that you have some idea about the Japanese culture and their obsession with the youth. The protagonists here are merely children, and yet their acts will leave you shell-shocked. The narrative has a generous dose of dark humor, and the violence that is dubbed cartoonish by some definitely has some serious shock value. The scene in the lighthouse pushes the boundaries of extreme, and there are many more morbidly gruesome deaths throughout the movie. The dialogue might come across as a bit corny, but that is hardly much of a flaw when you have such an engaging plot. The cast comprises actual teenagers who did a great job with such disturbing roles. Overall, Battle Royale deserves to be watched by everyone who appreciates the excellence and uniqueness of Japanese cinema. Escape Room, 2019. 6 people who come from very different backgrounds are invited to be part of an escape room challenge with prize money of $10,000. When they arrive at the office to accept it, they find themselves locked and realize that the puzzle has already begun. They escape from one room only to land in another one. Some rooms start to heat up, while in others the temperatures drop sharply. The clock is ticking, and they have to find a way to survive. They must dive deep into their lives and pick up the smallest of clues to figure a way out of this deadly maze. The movie clearly draws influence from the likes of Cube and Saw, as it creates a similar ambience of terror. It is an enjoyable little thriller that tries to stir your mind, over-shocking you with violence and gore. The focus is clearly on the puzzles that come up one after another, and the fast-paced narrative will keep your eyes glued to the screen. The movie picks up steam from the very first scene where you see a character being crushed by the walls closing in. The characters are not one-dimensional dummies, and the visual appeal of the flick is very impressive. The concept of the puzzles and the rooms were quite interesting. Our only complaint is the climax that somewhat borders on the nonsensical. The twist at the end was a bit too much to swallow, but other than that, Escape Room is a promising movie that will be an entertaining watch for sure. 13 Sins, 2014. Elliot Brindle is a salesman who is trapped under a mountain of debts. He expected a promotion to help him get married to his pregnant girlfriend, but his unethical boss fires him.
You're firing me?
He also has to take care of his disabled brother, and trouble mounts further when his estranged father decides to live with him. When he is at his wit's end, he gets a cryptic phone call where a stranger invites him to be part of a game. Elliot will have to complete 13 tasks in return for a handsome amount of money. Desperately in need of it, he agrees to take up the challenge. The tasks start off slow and easy, and after each completion, he finds the cash deposited in his account.
Have to do is complete 13 challenges. You've already completed 2.
However, soon the jobs become deadlier and grisly in nature. He realizes that he is merely a pawn who is trapped in this devious game by some unknown masterminds. Is there an escape for Elliot from the 13 Sins? 13 Sins is a remake of the 2006 film titled 13 Beloved. And it is a brave effort by the director Daniel Stamm. The interesting premise has us sold, and we loved the intelligent plot that holds the movie together. It is almost like Elliot is a blind servant who is committing atrocities which are actually planned by someone else. The build-up to the story, the introduction of Crisis and the protagonist, and the deeply sketched characters make things very interesting. Mark Webber steals the show as the protagonist, and the other members of the cast are well suited in their respective roles. Ron Perlman deserves a mention for his unique performance, and it is said that he did not watch the original movie so that it did not influence his acting. 13 Sins has its moments with some engaging action sequences and gritty dark humor. The grim theme of the movie is made all the more serious as the narrative throws a few curveballs at you regarding the morally depraved depths to which some people can sink in their desperation. At the end of it, you will be constantly asking yourself how far you would go for a sizable sum of money. The movie fared poorly at the box office, but we will never understand why. The Bellco Experiment, 2016. It is just another day in the office for 80 Americans who work at Bellco Corp. The office building is a high-rise in Colombia, and the employees learn to their horror that they are trapped inside the building in what appears to be some kind of twisted social experiment. A voice on the intercom gives them specific instructions, demanding 2 of the workers be killed within 30 minutes.
Murder any 2 of your fellow employees within the next half hour.
Friends are turned into enemies, and new allegiances are forged as only the strongest can survive in this dreadful situation. Participation is mandatory, and the employees must play this deadly game or get killed right away. Yes, the concept is too familiar for those who have enjoyed movies like Saw and Battle Royale. However, the lack of originality doesn't seem to affect the quality of this impeccable storytelling. The screenplay was written by James Gunn, who was also supposed to be the director, but he backed out eventually, citing his apprehension on spending so much time directing such a violent movie. The content never runs dry, and it is either breathtaking action or intriguing dark humor to keep you interested. The politics between the groups, the alliances getting made and broken, and the sudden deaths are all too familiar, but some things never get boring. Technically, the movie does a brilliant job with a perfect claustrophobic, crisis-filled environment being created courtesy of some stunning cinematography. The lighting is perfect, and we loved the action scene in neon. The climax left a lot to be desired, but overall, the movie is certainly a one-time watch. If you have a thing for movies like Battle Royale, this will certainly be like an old cake in a new cover.
Whoa, everybody.
Exam, 2009. 8 candidates have been shortlisted for the final test to join a reputed corporation. Brought into a windowless room, an invigilator hands them each a sheet and allots them 80 minutes to solve the question. However, the trick is that the paper contains no questions at all. There are 3 rules that the candidates have to abide by. Firstly, they cannot talk to the invigilator or the armed guard. They cannot leave the room before the time is up, and they cannot spoil the piece of paper that has been handed out to them. When one of the candidates starts to write something on the paper, she is removed for spoiling it. The others figure out that they are allowed to talk to each other, but that hardly solves the problem. In fact, it creates some more trouble as the clock is ticking and tensions start increasing. How far can they go to secure the ultimate job? It takes quality content to make a movie interesting, especially when the entire narrative takes place in a single room. This low-budget gem does that successfully and plays with the psychology of the viewer. The production values are surprisingly polished, and the tense atmosphere can be quite unnerving for horror noobs. The direction by Stuart Hazeldine is simply flawless, and he ties up the bits and pieces of the plot to be an engaging watch. The unknown cast is not a letdown, and Luke Mabley deserves a special mention for his performance. The character study is fascinating, and the movie explores what people might do in stressful and confusing situations. The low budget does little damage to the film, and visually it is stunning even with the same location throughout. As the candidates try everything possible to figure out the question, you will be gripped by the ambience that worsens by the minute. Some people complain about Exam being boring, but we strongly recommend it simply for the innovative plotline that bypasses any major loopholes. Youre Next, 2011. Paul and Aubrey Davison invite their 4 children and their partners for a get-together to celebrate their wedding anniversary. It is an excuse to bridge the gaps created over the years, but the family has bigger problems to deal with. As the celebrations begin in their family weekend estate, some crossbow-wielding assassins in animal masks seem to be attacking them. The only way for the family to survive the threat is to stick together in these trying times. But who are the attackers, and what is their motive? Often we start watching a movie without expecting anything special, but the end result surprises us completely. Youre Next is one such movie, and the smart script combined with the direction by Adam Wingard is exemplary. The makers sidestep the usual cliches that we find in such movies, and the perfect pacing makes things very interesting for the viewers. The victims here are not a group of dumb teenagers, so they put up a fight against the assassins who aren't invincible either. Overall, it adds a realistic touch to the narrative that makes the execution meaningful. All throughout, the moments of black comedy have been planted smartly, and the twists in the story will grab your attention. We loved the use of handheld camera to increase the tension in the atmosphere, and the set was the perfect abandoned house. The gorehounds would be mighty pleased with all the blood and violence, and some of the action scenes will provide a sought-after adrenaline rush. Wait for the end, because the climax will throw you off your chairs.
Where are the keys to the car?
Identity, 2003. Several people gather at a cheap motel in Nevada because they are caught in a dangerous rainstorm. These are individuals from different walks of life who just happened to find themselves together in the region and took shelter in the motel. The roads are washed out and they cannot leave. Things take a turn for the worse when a mysterious killer starts murdering them one by one. The body count starts to rise, and the survivors are clueless as to who is behind the killings. Maybe their arrival at the motel is not a matter of mere chance. Identity has a thought-provoking story, largely due to the unusual premise. This isn't some random B-horror movie, and right from the opening sequence, you will be hooked on the exciting narrative. The cast delivers the goods, and the likes of John Cusack and Jake Busey simply steal the show. For use, this is a psychological thriller of the highest order, and the survive or die situation is a recipe for a suspense-filled atmosphere. The twist alone is enough to go and watch the movie because we haven't seen such a twist in a very long time. In fact, to keep it a secret, the makers filmed multiple endings to confuse those who could leak out the real one. If we must pick a problem with Identity, we would have to point a finger at the poorly written lines that stick out like a sore thumb in some scenes. Vile, 2011. A group of 4 friends make the biggest mistake of their lives when they offer a lift to a hitchhiking woman. They end up being drugged by her, and when they wake up, they find themselves in a house with another group of 6. They are shocked to see something attached to their necks, and a grinning woman informs them through the TV screens that they all have vials implanted at the base of their skulls.
This device is intended to do one thing only, which is to
These must be filled with a specific brain fluid that is secreted when someone is subjected to extreme pain. Freedom comes at a price, as they must inflict serious pain on each other if they want to escape from this madness. As time ticks away, the task tests their bonds because they have to work together to survive. The story is rather simple, and for the fans of Saw, it is hardly anything new. What is special about Vile is the way they spice the same old plot with some disturbing torture scenes. The movie is as vile as the title suggests, but it pales in comparison to Saw. We would have loved it if the makers spent a bit more time exploring the characters instead of making them into generic horror film victims. Another drawback of the movie is the writing, because the bizarre concept is a bit too hard to believe at times. A major loophole lay in the concept itself.
You can't just decide.
The brain fluids required were dopamine, adrenaline, and oxytocin, all of which are also released during sex. So instead of torturing each other to fill up the vial, they could have simply fooled around with each other and escaped unhurt. Maybe having 2 writers for the movie wasn't the smartest idea and caused creative conflicts. Overall, Vile is far from perfect, but it does have the elements to keep you engaged throughout. Truth or Dare, 2012. A group of young British teens are enjoying a party playing a game of Truth or Dare. However, the game soon gets out of hand after one of the young people is picked on by the others. After a few months, they are invited to a party by the guy who was ridiculed, and when the others reach his parents' mansion, they are taken to a cabin further up the road. The isolated cabin seems to be the perfect place for vengeance, as a maniacal killer seeks revenge for his brother's death. Can they survive the murderous rampage from the man who is determined to kill them all? When we first watched the movie, we were expecting the same old cliché-ridden teen scream slasher. We were pleasantly surprised when it turned out to be much more substantial than that. With a typical Saw-style premise, Truth or Dare scores high thanks to a rather inventive script. The characters are well drawn and the acting performances complement the narrative. You will constantly be left wondering what happens next, and that is the beauty of this engaging thriller. The ending is certainly not what you would expect, and some of the scenes will stay with you long after you're done watching. The violence here is absolutely brutal, but it never gets sickening. After a very nice build-up, the story culminates in an unforgettable climax. It will remind you of 80s slasher horror style, but with a narrative that is much more meaningful. As long as you don't have a problem with all the recycled horror, you will have a great time with this unpredictable flick.
And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.